Good morning and welcome to beautiful Limousin, France. Today is the first day of progress on Pandora, my lovely little Cox GTM. Unfortunately, today I'm not going to be starting the chassis though. I'm going to be building the tools in order to build the car because I need to build a workbench and I need to build a sheet metal brake and a notcher. Hopefully we'll at least get the workbench done today, but it's the problem with starting a car build with no workshop. Before I do that, before I build the car, I've got to build the workshop. And if you hear noises in the background during, much like the sweeping that's happening now, during the filming of this video, it's because I've got my next door but one neighbour who also happens to be my dad, who also happens to be an incredibly skilled engineer helping me out. So that's awesome. Thank you, Dad.
Welcome.
So yeah. He doesn't want to be on camera because he's my dad, but yeah. So if you see hands that aren't these hands, that are slightly smaller than these hands, that's my dad. Right, let's get stuck in. The first of the new tools is this lovely little mini bandsaw. It's basically like a hacksaw. It's like part hacksaw, part miter saw. So you can set it at an angle and it will cut that angle all day long, and when it's finished the cut, it just turns itself off. It's like a hacksaw, but it's more repeatable, it's a bit more precise, and of course it's automated. And these blades that are a band, it just rolls round and round and round. They wear out a lot slower than hacksaw blades do. Hacksaw blades, especially if you're cutting stainless steel or anything like that, tend to wear out very, very quickly. But bandsaw blades, because you can lubricate it as it cuts, tend to last much, much longer. And I used to have a much bigger one of these a long time ago, but it's amazing how useful a tiny one like this actually is. And if I had a bigger one, it would just get in the way because these little ones are very capable. So this is absolutely fine for my purposes, and actually most home garages. So we're going to be making the bench out of this stuff, which is 50mm by 50mm or 2" by 2". Angle line, basically angled mild steel. And I'm going to be using the same stuff for my kitchen units. When I ordered this steel, I actually ordered enough to do both my workbench, and my kitchen units, the frame for my kitchen units. So I thought I might as well bulk order it. So we've just had a bunch of trouble with this saw because the blade stopped going round, it stopped circulating. And we checked tension, we checked the motor, we couldn't figure it out. And so we thought, right, remove the guard and have a look at what's going on with the blade itself. And as you can see here, the blade was actually rubbing on the guard all the way around and trying to cut its way through the guard. So either the company that made this saw expected you to remove all of the health and safety stuff and all of the guards. I've never had a saw like this with a guard on, and I actually don't know why it needs a guard there. Because obviously you shouldn't be putting your fingers anywhere near a blade, but it just goes to show, like I say, either they don't expect you to keep the guards on it and to remove all the health and safety stuff when it arrives, or it was just a very bad designed guard. But now that's gone, it works perfectly. Ta-da! Quick tip, whenever you're doing anything like this, it's going to make me deaf, deaf is this little saw. Whenever you're doing anything like this, make sure you cut all your long lengths first. Because what a lot of people tend to do is cut all the short bits first, and then they end up with not enough material. Whereas if you cut all your long lengths, you end up with a bunch of short lengths left over. So we've cut out the top now, which is a bunch of 45-degree angles that will all be welded together to make a rectangle. Now all I need to do is make 4 1-meter long legs. And this is, by the way, this section of the floor isn't painted and leveled yet. It will be later this week. That's why it's not grey. Well, it is grey, but it's not the same grey as that grey. What I need is a workbench to make my workbench on. When you're working on the floor like this, you have to check that the bar is level before you tighten everything up and before you start cutting. Otherwise your cuts will all be on angles that you didn't intend them to be on. They'll be straight this way, but this way they'll all be on a cocked angle. So every single time I cut, I'm going to have to check with a level like this before I start cutting. And to make the chassis for the GTM, for Pandora, I'm going to have to make a chassis table, which is a made, engineered, level and flat surface in order to make it on. Otherwise, I didn't have to level it up every single time I did anything, and then at the end of all of that, there's very little chance that it would actually be level. So it's all the same stuff really, making a workbench, making a chassis table, it's all just different levels of complexity. Top tip, when you're doing anything with steel like this that's grey, a pencil's fine, but a colouring in pencil, whatever you call it, coloured pencil, is actually better, because obviously grey on grey, it's really easy to confuse your line or lose it and have to measure 4 times like I've just done. So, coloured pencils for the win. That is much easier to see than that. You can see how it's very easy to lose it. So, thank you, Crayola. I often see people doing engineering stuff with pencils like these. These are carpenter's pencils, big, thick. But the problem, woodworking pencils, the problem with this is that's the thickness of a woodworking saw blade, which is a lot thicker than this. So your accuracy becomes a lot less good than with a sharp, smaller pencil. It is only accurate as your pencil is thick. So now I have to make 4 feet so that we can bolt the workbench down. I had to think what words were then. It's difficult to do this filming stuff when I'm concentrating. Which is funny because I drive on camera. And driving on camera should be difficult to speak and do. But this is, for some reason, this is harder. It's a separate skill, engineering, metalwork, while speaking. It's another skill I'm going to have to learn, I think. So the welder we're using today is the multi-MIG, and we're using it with gasless wire. Basically a MIG feeds welding wire into the gun as you weld, and this stuff has a flux core. So just like soldering with flux solder, if you do electrical soldering and that kind of thing, it gets rid of the air around the weld as you weld. It's kind of one step up from a stick welder, but it's not as good as MIG welding with argon gas, inert gas, or even or TIG welding, which is of course the best. But it's a bit of a gooey weld, but it dresses up just fine. And for making a workbench, it's more than adequate. Remember this guy and the way that the saw stopped working after 2 minutes of using it? That was on our second cut, and it turns out that it was pulling the saw blade, even though we had the saw set perfectly at 45 degrees. It must have been pulling the saw blade slightly like this, and I've cocked up. But that's why I'm making a work table before I make a GTM chassis, so that I can get all the tools that are new all dialed in, because things like this happen, and it's completely normal that they happen, and that's why I'm including it in the video, because such is life. But it's okay, because that's another reason why we're using the gasless MIG, because the need for precision and a precision fit is far less necessary. So we are slightly out, but it won't affect a work table. And now this has gone, all our cuts will be straight for the rest of time. Quick health and safety moment when using a death wheel with a flapper disc on and no guard. I've got a big scar up this finger here, and that's because one day I was cleaning deck planks with one of these and my finger slid. If you're going to remove guards off tools, it's your own fault if you hurt yourself with them. don't remove guards off tools, people. Unfortunately, I share this workshop, and I've always shared a workshop with my dad. And my dad's left-hand drive, and I'm right-hand drive. And so that means that many tools end up without guards, and I end up without bits of my finger. So whatever you do, please be incredibly careful when using power tools. Now what we're going to do is we're going to weld on the feet on the end of the legs like that, and then we'll weld the legs onto the table. The reason we're doing it in this order is it just makes it easier to do. So I should explain what this bit of stainless steel in the bottom is doing. Because angle iron has a radius on it, when it's bent it has a rounded inner angle. The inside of the angle is round basically. You can't butt another piece straight up to it. It won't sit level. So you have to shim the bottom while you weld it, and then once you've welded it, we'll pull that shim out. That's just a piece of 8mm 316 stainless steel that we had in our box of stuff. So there we have it, a semi-completed workbench. We had an absolute nightmare with the gasless MIG in the end. We bought that spool of wire about a year ago before we knew where to get argon from for a little emergency job. And it's rubbish, to be honest. The more you use it, the worse it gets. And but we managed in the end. This section of the table will be a welding table, and then this section will be oak, and will be a workbench. And we need to paint it yet, and obviously make a top for it. But we are one step closer. But yeah, I won't be using that gasless MIG anymore. It's horrible stuff. It's alright, okay for tacking something in place, but for actual proper welding or any sort of actual work, it's awful. And we've made it nice and high, and that's because my dad's tall and I'm taller. And if I had a normal sized human being next to me here, they'd be about this tall, and the work table would be like that. It'd be like doing your homework when you're a kid at the dining room table. But for us enormous elephant type people, it's just about perfect. So after a couple of days and a bit of reflection, we've realised we want to add another couple of legs to the table because it's slightly springy, and even bolted to the wall and stuff, when you put really heavy things on top of it, say an engine or something like that, it's gonna flex, it's gonna bow a bit, and we don't want the table to bend. So we're going to add another couple of legs. I'm going to cut those, and we're going to machine up the top. The wood that we're using for the top is the same oak that I'm going to be using upstairs in my bedroom for my upstairs flooring of my house, because I've got loads of it, and I can sacrifice this much to have a workbench, and then this side is getting a big steel plate on it. I've become addicted to these Velcro cable tidies. It's just so much easier than having wires getting damaged. Over the years, I've had so many machines that get a damaged wire or whatever just dangling in storage, and something rubs up against it or something like that. It's so convenient, and just store them on the end like that. They're the best thing ever. I found them because of a YouTube tips video actually about doing stuff with GoPros and camera gear and all that stuff, and Velcro strapping camera gear together so that it doesn't rustle around in your bag. And now everything in my life is Velcro strapped together. It's really good for tool bags and stuff like that, to stop things jostling around and making noise in your car, but also tidying cables in your workshop. I really like them, they're awesome.
Hey, that was good. Spot on.
This is a centre punch. Basically, it's so that when you drill a piece of steel, or stainless steel, or whatever, your drill doesn't slip all over the place. And there's two sorts. There's one like this that you smack with a hammer, and there's another one that's spring loaded. I prefer the spring loaded ones, but this is the one that I've got at the minute. I had a spring loaded one, but it died. If you're wondering why I lubricate all my cuts, it makes your drill bits and your saw blades last longer. Wrong way. I may have slightly tapped the concrete when I drilled through. Use a bit of wood, will you? I know, closing the door after the horse is bolted and all that kind of thing, but shut up. It's really hot. It's 36 in the shade, which is 90 something, 96 something Fahrenheit. It's really hot. Leave me alone. Do my best. It's really hot. It makes you so tired. You'll see a lot of people that work with steel that don't lubricate their cuts. But when I was but a young boy, and I was just learning to do stuff for the first time, I used to work with stainless steel all the time because I work with boats. And stainless steel is weird because it actually gets harder as it heats up. So when you drill a piece of stainless steel, as you drill it, it gets harder to drill. So you've got to change the speed on your drill and have your drill go really slowly and cut through it really slowly so it doesn't heat the material up. But the other way to do it is to lubricate the cut, and your drill bits last like 3 times longer before you have to sharpen them again. So it saves time and effort and makes everything better. Cools the drill down, cools the material down, and this is mild steel, so it cuts like butter in comparison to stainless steel. It's lovely, but that's why I'm lubricating every single cut I do. It's just force of habit. So as is the reality of doing jobs around other jobs, yesterday we did a little bit of work on this. We cut this piece of steel, but we didn't film it. The reason we didn't film it is there wasn't much to look at, just lots of grinding dust. But this piece of steel was the old top to my well, which is at the top of my land. And when we redid the well, we actually didn't know where the well was at first because it was covered over by a banking. It was just completely covered in soil. And the thing stopping the soil falling in the well was this plate. Now my well has since been completely redone, but we are recycling this plate as a welding tabletop because you can't weld on wood really. It scorches it and chars it and makes a mess. So we cut this piece of steel up, and I made 2 new legs for the middle of this, and I made a cross brace as well. And the cross brace obviously will fit across in the middle, and some new feet. Today we're going to make an oak top for this side of it, and so that the oak sits on the same level as the steel, so that you can slide things across from one thing to another, or if you have a big thing on here it doesn't end up on an angle. We're going to make some adjustable feet for the steel so that we can adjust the height of the steel and the height of the wood and get it all nice and flush. So that's basically what we've been up to. It's very difficult when you're doing a bunch of jobs at once. Sometimes you're better just chipping away at it. But yeah, we've got plenty of stuff fabricated. Now what we've got to do is head next door and start tonguing and grooving. So this is our homemade spindle moulder. It's a table mounted router that spins at 22,000 RPM. Your feed planks in that side, they come out this side. There's a table mounted router here with a special bit, and it spins at 22,000 RPM, and it cuts either, depending on which head you have in it. Show you. That is for cutting the groove in a plank. and, oh sorry it's not, this one's for cutting the tongue in a plank, and this one is for cutting the groove in a plank. So it basically tongue and grooves wood and produces lots and lots of very fine dust, which is why I'm wearing a mask. But yeah, and that way it all fits together. The reason why you want to tongue and groove wood, look, there's a piece here, a test piece. That's a tongue, like that. And this is, oh, it's tongued on both sides. But the reason why you want to tongue and groove wood like that, when you put it together, rather than just having planks, is over the years, with differences in humidity, wood wants to do what it wants to do. So one plank will go up, one plank will go down, all of that kind of thing, and you end up with a very wibbly, wobbly and uneven worktop. Whereas if you tongue and groove it and glue it all together, the wood is basically one piece of wood. Your entire worktop is one solid lump, and won't try and distort and won't try and move and shift and go where it wants to go. And so your worktop will stay true and flat and level for 100 years. Well, that's the plan, at least. I say worktop or floor upstairs, because this is also the test for doing my floor upstairs. And it's all going to plan, so I'm really, really happy today. It's bizarre, but the first time I ever see my bedroom flooring will be as a tabletop. But you've got to test it sometimes. Like I was saying yesterday with the bandsaw, to test and set up a bandsaw, it was a really good way to test it to make the work table. Because the first time you ever use a new tool, you don't want to be doing it making your chassis with your really expensive roll cage tubing. You want to be doing it, on something where the precision doesn't really matter, because you can level it all up and you're using a welding technique that's slightly less precise. So it really helps to set things up and to figure things out if you do a smaller project first, much like a work table. So this is a work table, but it's also the way that we are figuring things out. We are setting up new tools and all that kind of thing for the workshop and for my house. Like I said, my kitchen that will go here is the same, well, a similar method of construction, but made of the same material as the workshop table. And the worktop for that table is the same construction as the doors for the doors for my kitchen unit, but also my upstairs flooring. So it's all one big test, but at the end of it we get a nice work table. Remember a long time ago, or it feels like a long time ago now, when I first got the wood for my flooring, and I made a barn video and I showed you all the wood and I said, right now it's bits of tree, but one day it shall be wood. This is wood, and that's what you've got to do to bits of tree to make it into beautiful pieces of wood. But it is absolutely stunning. And all from diseased trees that would have fallen down anyway. So what we're going to do is we've just added glue to these two planks, because we don't have a big clamping table. If you were doing this as a business, if you were professionally sticking wood together to make engineered timber and that kind of thing, what you would have is a massive steel clamping table with a million of these giant clamps. Well, bigger than this actually. But because we might never do this ever again, we might never make a tabletop like this ever again, we try and do our best with what we've got. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick two together, and then we're going to let it go off, and then we're going to add a plank and then clamp it up, and then add a plank and then clamp it up, and then add a plank and clamp it up. The reason why we're using these spaces, these are just offcuts, look. These are just offcuts of the tongue and groove, and the reason we're using those is that it stops the tongue or the groove getting damaged, because obviously that's the weakest part of the plank. So yeah, just clamp two up and then add one. Clamp two up, let it go off, then add one. The glue we're using is waterproof PVA wood glue. When I was in Spain, this stuff was like gold. You couldn't actually buy it because it's so warm there. They just didn't bother selling waterproof PVA, and I had to go to Gibraltar to buy it. So I used to have to make special trips to Gibraltar just to buy glue. But it's water-based and it can be removed just with a wet cloth or a damp cloth, not really a wet cloth. You don't want to wet the wood. So we want to thread the holes in this plate so that we can screw a bolt into them. And the way you do that is with these. These are called taps. And often in videos and on telly, you see people use one of these and these together. Never use a drill and taps together. Always use the proper tool, because it is nigh on impossible to get a drill straight, and it cuts way too fast and you'll always end up with a naff thread. And the way these work is that when you buy them, they always come in a little box, and it's a set of 3 and they have lines on them, right? And the way it works is you go first, second, and then the last one has no lines on it, and that's called the plug. So 1, 2, plug, like that. And the reason why you use this tool is because it has two long handles on it, and it allows you to get very good control and get it nice and straight. Always cut using lubricant as well. And when you thread it in, you can go nice and slow and make sure you keep it. Get it started. Make sure you keep it straight like that. And if it gets a bit tough, just back it off, because you are cutting a thread into metal. And this is very tough metal because it's very old plate, so it's full of carbon, it's super hard. So you've just got to take it nice and easy and cut it all the way through. The other thing to remember is that these taps are super hard, and if you just try and ram them through, quite often they'll get, can you see how that little metal shaving just came off there? Quite often they'll get stuck and then they'll snap, and if they snap you can't drill them out or anything. They're an absolute nightmare to get out if you snap a tap inside a hole. So be very careful. So if you're going to do anything like this at home, the way this works is the hole that's in the table is 10mm, and then obviously that's clearance, and you can lift it up like that, and the bolt's in from underneath. I'm going to put a nut between the plate and the table, and then all you have to do is tighten the nut, and that'll lift the table up and down. But when you're drilling your holes, do one first and then do your others, and that'll locate it so that if you drill all your holes and then you try and do it, you're going to have an absolute nightmare getting everything just lined up. So if you just do one first, that locates your plate on your table, and obviously put a bolt in, and then go around and do the rest. Don't try and rush it and drill all your holes all at once, because it won't work. I can't even see you. My safety glasses are filthy. These safety glasses are made by Ball, and they're the only safety glasses I've ever had that I actually find comfy. They usually rub on my ears, but it's very hot. It's nearly 100 Fahrenheit in here, whatever that is, high 30s, and I keep sweating and my eyebrows are leaving eyebrow marks on my glasses. Anyway, we have now complete our welding tabletop with adjustable feet. So you can just see the bolts here, and what you do is you can lift it up. It's loose on the bolts, but obviously the weight holds it in place, and the bolts come up from below, and you can just adjust the nut to adjust the height of the tabletop like that. And what that allows for is it allows that when we put the wood, the oak platform on, when we put the oak tabletop on, you can actually adjust the steel to the height of the oak and have it as a completely flush surface, so when you're doing jobs you don't have a step in your table and things aren't wobbling around. And there we have it, a beautiful workbench from scratch. It's not completely finished, I haven't bolted it down yet, and I'd really like to sand this top with my big belt sander. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to source any big sanding belts here in France yet, so that'll come in the future. It'll just make it super perfectly flat and really bring out the grain. But other than that, she's finished. I've never had a workbench before. I've never had a workstation that's at my height, that I don't have to stoop down for. This will make filming and doing things around here so much easier and so much faster. I'm really proud of it. I can set up a tripod on the workstation and actually work at my own height without getting a bad back. It's mega. I'm really happy with it. And it's mostly from materials we already had. And pretty cheap if you don't count, you know, the thousands of euros worth of tools that we've used to make it. That's one of the things that people don't realise when you watch telly and you watch, you know, garage shows where they're building cars, or you watch carpentry shows. It's getting it all set up and getting all your tools sorted and getting all your workshop as a functional workshop that really costs the money and takes the time. Once you've got everything set up, making things then becomes much faster. And that's partly why it's taken so long to make this table, because we've as you've seen, I've been working on the floor all week, but no longer. And like I said, this will make life so much easier and make things so much better around here. And it's really nice to see what my floor, okay, I'm going to screw my floor down, but it's really nice to see what my bedroom floor will look like when it's done. It's the first sign I've seen of it, which is really funny that it's on a workshop table. But I'm massively happy. And I now have to go and edit this video and upload it because it's taken me so long to make this table that I'm actually on the day of upload today. So thank you all for watching. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them down in the comment section below. If you'd like to support this YouTube channel, the best way to do that is to share these videos with your friends. If you have a friend who is making a workshop or has a new shed or has a new garage and you think that they would really enjoy this video, then please make sure you share it with them. Other than that, the usual liking, commenting and subscribing is very much appreciated. Thank you very much for watching. Please be awesome to each other, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye. Filming me sweep up is a bit like watching Jamie Oliver wash up. Why are you still here? Go away.